The desert heat pressed down on forward operating base Scorpion with a weight that seemed to soak through everything. Dust clung to boots and uniforms, grinding into seams no matter how tightly they were fastened. Inside the command tent, the air was hardly cooler. The glow of fluorescent lights flickered over walls lined with maps and surveillance photos, satellite shots pinned in overlapping layers that spoke of endless patrols and blurred borders. The air smelled faintly of sweat, canvas, and ink from markers that had scrawled arrows and grid coordinates across the maps. Sergeant Cassian Vidor stood at the tactical table like a man who had earned his authority through grit rather than ceremony. At 38, his face was weathered into a permanent scowl, his skin lined by years of desert sun and sleepless nights. His hands, thick and scarred, traced the outline of a compound nestled in foothills. Vidor's voice cut through the chatter as easily as the heat cut through the tent walls. Listen up. His squad, 6 specialists in all, fell into a loose semicircle. Lieutenant Rhodes leaned against the edge of the table, sniper rifle broken down in the case beside him. His eyes sharp, even without the scope. Corporal Ashton carried himself with the restless energy of a demolitions expert, a man who saw buildings as puzzles, waiting to be dismantled. Specialist Jensen, the medic, checked and rechecked, his gear with habitual focus. A man who had seen too many torn bodies to ever let his pack run short. Zephyr Reeves, communications wizard, had wires and attachments strung from his vest like talismans. His radio kit modified with taped edges and tiny scratches from years of use. 2 seasoned rangers filled out the circle, one posted toward the tent flap, the other watching the rear. Both steady presences with the subtle aura of men who had faced firefights and returned. Their gear was like a collection of biographies, a saint's medallion taped to a strap, a worn leather bracelet, a strip of colored cloth knotted through a pouch. Each detail spoke of survival, of men who had personalized their armor until it became second skin. The flap of the tent shifted, and a Lowenthorn entered. She was 31, moving with the careful precision of someone who wanted to draw no attention. The tablet pressed to her chest looked almost like a shield. Unlike the squad, her uniform was untouched by customization. Regulation standard from collar to boots. No talismans. No scrawled notes. No battle scars. Her brown hair was tied simply, her eyes sharp though lowered, scanning the room with caution. Lieutenant Rhodes noticed her first and smirked. Well, the Pentagon babysitter arrives. The others chuckled. Vidor barely glanced up from the map. Find a corner. Thorn. Try not to disturb the professionals. His dismissal cut sharper than any insult. She obeyed, taking a seat at the edge of the tent, the literal corner where shadow pooled. Her tablet lit softly as she opened files, the glow catching her face. The squad ignored her, voices rising again in the confident rhythm of men used to being heard. Ashton leaned toward Jensen, whispering loud enough for her to hear. Someone brought a librarian to a gunfight. The joke sparked quiet laughter. Elowen kept her expression neutral, fingers steady on the screen, but her eyes tracked every movement at the table, noting the patterns, the pauses, the details in silence. Corners and edges defined her presence. She stayed where she was pushed. Yet from the margin, her gaze consumed the room. Vidor's scowl deepened as he outlined the approach route, dust clinging to his boots. First impressions locked around her like a cage, but beneath the unmodified uniform and quiet compliance, unseen strength waited. The tactical table was crowded with maps, satellite imagery, and hastily scrawled notes. Sergeant Cassian Vidor leaned over the terrain photo, tracing the southwest ridge with his finger. His tone was firm, confident, the cadence of a man used to shaping plans rather than debating them. We move under cover of darkness. Insert here between 0200 and 0400. Set observation posts, and extract before dawn. The squad nodded in agreement. The rhythm of long familiarity, Elowen Thorne studied the routes displayed across the map. Her fingers paused over her tablet as she matched the coordinates with recent satellite thermal data. Sergeant. She began carefully. That ridge shows consistent patrols every 40 minutes. The eastern approach has lighter traffic and natural cover. Her voice was quiet, but steady. The tense mood shifted. Rhodus raised an eyebrow, smirking at Ashton. Ashton leaned back in his chair, whispering, "Librarian wants to write the battle plan." The laughter spread. Even Reeves, usually more thoughtful, allowed himself a grin. Vider's head snapped up, his eyes, sharp, with the memory of 3 tours, fixed on her with irritation. Intelligence analysts don't run operations. They stay behind desks where they belong. His words cut quick. Final. Elowen dipped her chin slightly in acknowledgement, hiding any flicker of emotion. Her fingers tapped quietly across her tablet, pulling data into silent columns. The squad returned to their discussion, voices rising again with easy confidence. Elowen withdrew into silence, but her eyes never stopped moving. She tracked every detail, the cadence of their banter, the points they emphasized, the mistakes they overlooked. Corners and edges defined her place again, unseen but attentive. When the briefing ended, the squad dispersed with the casual ease of soldiers preparing for familiar danger. Elowen Lingel, the tactical table, now quiet, lay scattered with routes and notes. Her gaze rested briefly on the soldiers' talismans taped to gear and rifles. To them, these were anchors of survival. Her anchor was different, the tablet in her hands glowing faintly as she reviewed encrypted transmissions. Hours later, the desert night pressed cool against the base. Stars cut sharp patterns across the sky. Elowen sat alone outside the barracks, the blue light of her screen reflecting in her eyes. The squad's laughter drifted faintly from inside. The tone dismissive, even at a distance. She ignored it. A notification pulsed across her display. She shielded the tablet with her body, entered a layered code sequence, and opened the message. Lines of data scrolled past enemy frequencies, interference patterns, instructions buried in jargon. She typed a precise response, then systematically erased the record. For a moment, her shoulders straightened, her entire demeanor sharper. The awkward presence vanished, replaced by quiet focus. She looked across the base, her position chosen not for comfort but for sightlines, clear views of the command tent, the motor pool, and the open desert beyond. Watchful, silent, she returned to her role. Silence was her weapon. Preparation, her shield. 6 hours later, the desert air carried a brittle chill that clung to exposed skin. The squad moved as a single organism, steps measured, rifles angled, heads swiveling in steady rhythm, their boots pressed into the sand with careful precision. Each movement rehearsed through years of practice. Hand signals passed silently from point to rear, a choreography that spoke of shared history. Sergeant Cassian Vidor led with deliberate strides, Lieutenant Rhodus covering his flank, the Rangers fanning out along the edges. Behind them, Elowen Thorne kept pace with surprising ease, her breaths even, her strides steady despite the uneven terrain. She wore no talismans, no battered patches of gear to mark combat pedigree, only the unmodified weight of standard-issue equipment. Yet her movements betrayed a quiet discipline. Vidor, unwilling to take chances, had placed her in the middle of the formation, a position meant for protection but also containment. His unspoken thought was clear: better to keep the liability surrounded where she could do no harm. The ridge loomed in the distance, jagged against the star-filled sky. The desert wind whispered low, carrying the smell of dust and dry brush. Night vision goggles slid into place as the squad ascended, their green glow casting eerie shades over rock and shadow. Through the lenses, the compound below emerged stone and concrete structures clustered together, a perimeter dotted with faint lights. The faint glint of metallic equipment around the northernmost building. Vidor crouched at the crest. Scanning with a hunter's focus, he studied movement, patterns, the restless energy of guards changing position. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. Yet the hairs along his neck prickled. His instincts, honed through years of survival, whispered warning, "Something's off." He muttered. Lowering his goggles for a moment, the others adjusted their scopes, reporting numbers, weapons, vehicles. Their voices were low but confident. Shaped by the comfort of routine reconnaissance, Elowen crouched slightly apart, hair tablet dimmed. Her eyes locked on the compound without expression. She noticed the faint pulse of light around the communications array, a rhythm too regular to be incidental. She said nothing, watching carefully. Then, the night shattered. A burst of illumination flooded the ridge. Floodlights snapped alive with brutal force, cutting through goggles, stripping away the comfort of shadows. The squad froze under the sudden blaze. Their carefully constructed invisibility ripped away in an instant. Shouts echoed from the valley. Foreign voices, sharp with urgency. Figures poured from the compound. Rifles raised. Boots striking hard against stone. Adrenaline surged through the squad. Rhodes cursed, already adjusting her scope. The others pulling into defensive formation. Vidor's jaw tightened as he hissed. "We're compromised." His voice carried controlled urgency, the tone of a leader unwilling to waste seconds. The squad shifted into practice positions, muzzles rising toward the approaching figures. Sand scattered as Boots scrambled for cover along rocks and shallow depressions. The Rangers moved wide, rifles steady. While Ashton prepped charges in case retreat became necessary, the air thickened with the unmistakable hum of danger. Each soldier's breath, now edged with the weight of survival. Elowen alone remained still, her body low but her expression calm. The harsh light painted her face starkly, revealing no fear, only a quiet focus as her eyes tracked the rapid mobilization below. Where others flinched at the glare, she stared into it as though already expecting revelation. The squad's illusion of control, built on reconnaissance and habit, cracked in seconds under the floodlights. Darkness had promised safety, but light delivered exposure. Merciless and undeniable, confidence dissolved into urgency, leaving only instinct to guide them. And in the midst of it, Elowen's stillness was a silent contrast. Unseen strength waiting beneath dismissal. Gunfire chased them off the ridge in a storm of tracer lines and dust. The squad broke into pairs, leapfrogging with desperate precision as rounds shattered stone at their heels. Vidor barked, clipped orders, his voice fighting to steady panic. The desert night erupted with noise. The silence of reconnaissance replaced by the chaos of survival. Elowen stayed in the center, moving with a calm stride that somehow matched their urgency, her eyes never flinching from the arcs of light cutting across the valley. They reached the first cluster of abandoned clay houses, walls cracked and roofs half collapsed. Dust swirled as bullets struck, sending shards into the air. The squad dived behind broken walls, lungs burning, weapons raised toward shadows that advanced. Jensen cried out, his thigh torn by a grazing round. Ashton cursed through clenched teeth, his arm marked by a bloody crease. They returned fire in short bursts, conserving ammunition that already felt thin. Vidor shoved his radio against his mouth, static flooding through the headset. "Scorpion, this is Vidor. Troop engaged. Request immediate extraction." The reply came delayed, muffled by interference. "Negative. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound at 0500. The line broke in static again. Vidor slammed the set against the wall, jaw locked tight. Waiting hours under siege was a death sentence. Meanwhile, Eloyn knelt beside Jensen, pulling the medical kit open with practiced care. She pressed gauze into his wound, murmuring steady words that carried more calm than warmth. Her hands moved fluidly, but between layers of bandage, she slid a slim black device, a concealed tool she shielded from the other's view. Her fingers traced wires hidden beneath the floorboards, eyes narrowing as she located the faint pulse of a transmitter embedded in the ruins. It looked like she was dressing a wound. In reality, she was isolating the core of an enemy beacon. Its signal disguised as noise, she pinched two leads together, severed the circuit, and slipped the component into her pouch. The light on her device blinked once and went dark. The squad never noticed. To them, she was simply the analyst playing medic, patching a man she barely knew. The enemy fire did not slow, but its precision faltered. Without their hidden transmitter feeding coordinates, their volleys grew wider, less certain. The squad took the change as fortune, never questioning why their cover suddenly held longer. Ashton muttered, "Maybe luck finally broke our way." Vidor grunted but said nothing, eyes flicking to the dwindling ammunition magazines at his feet. Inside the fractured walls, frustration simmered. Rodas cursed the delay of extraction. Reeves smacked the side of his radio unit, unable to push through interference. The Rangers shifted anxiously, scanning gaps in the clay with eyes that betrayed unease. Command's authority, so absolute hours ago, now felt distant and brittle. Elowen sat back against the wall, her breathing steady, blood on her hands from Jensen's bandage. She watched the men argue, her calm a quiet shadow in the chaos. Her posture gave nothing away. Yet beneath her silence, the order of battle had shifted. She alone knew the hidden beacon was gone, its power stripped, their survival bought for a little longer. The walls around them crumbled piece by piece, clay falling with each strike. The squad frayed like those walls, cohesion cracking under fire and exhaustion. Yet Elowen's gaze remained fixed, unshaken. To them, the night was collapsing. To her, it was realigning. The firefight dwindled into short, disparity bursts. Magazines rattled nearly empty. Every man felt the weight of the inevitable closing in. Jensen shifted with a groan, blood seeping through fresh bandages. Ashton reloaded with shaking hands, muttering under his breath. Vidor clenched his jaw. Radio pressed tight, though static had long replaced any hope of command. In the fractured silence between gunfire, a new sound emerged. The thump of rotor blades grew steadily louder, a low growl rolling over the desert like the promise of salvation. Heads jerked upward in unison, eyes bright with sudden hope. Finally, Reeves breathed, clutching his radio. Rodas risked a glance from the ruined wall. A helicopter's silhouette cut across the stars, floodlight beams slicing through the haze of dust and gunpowder. Relief surged through the squad like water to parched throats. Rescue had come, but then the angle changed. Instead of circling from the south, where the landing zone had been marked, the aircraft barreled in from the north, straight across enemy positions. No shots struck it, no rockets fired. The machine passed overhead like an unchallenged predator, its engines roaring directly above the compound they had been told was bristling with defenses. Confusion rippled through the squad. That's the wrong vector. Vidor muttered, suspicion hardening his tone. What the hell are they doing? The helicopter tilted, banking sharply, and descended not toward the open desert, but into the very courtyard where Elowen had taken cover minutes before. Dust whipped in violent spirals, stinging eyes and choking lungs. The side door slammed open. Inside, dark armored figures leaned out, weapons braced with confident precision. One of them lifted a gloved hand not to the squad, but directly to Elowen. "Get down," Vidor roared, thinking she was caught in the chaos, about to be torn apart by crossfire. His voice carried desperation more than command, but Elowen did not dive for cover. She moved forward. Her steps were deliberate, her head lifted against the blast of sand and rotor wash. In her hand glimmered a small device, its lens blinking a pattern of light in disciplined rhythm. She aimed it toward the helicopter, and the operator inside flashed a mirror signal back. The exchange was seamless. Practiced recognition. The squad gaped, frozen in disbelief. Ashton cursed under his breath. Rodas swore louder, confusion twisting his face. Reeves looked between his radio and the scene unfolding, as though his entire understanding of order had fractured. Vidor stood rigid, fury and incomprehension battling in his expression. The operator reached outward, extending a bundle of gear. Eloin took it without hesitation, shrugging into a vest fitted for combat. Tightening straps with efficient movements, she clipped a headset into place, holstered a sidearm with muscle memory that betrayed long familiarity. Her demeanor shifted with every buckle fastened, every piece of gear secured. The meek analyst vanished, replaced by a figure carved from certainty. In the dust-choked courtyard, under the roaring thunder of blades, masks fell away. The squad saw not the baggage they had mocked, but the calm authority of someone who had always known more than she revealed. Eloin turned once toward them, her face steady, eyes sharpened by purpose. No explanation left her lips. None was needed. The truth blazed as clearly as the coded light had a moment earlier. She was not their burden. She was the center of the mission. The courtyard erupted in chaos. The moment Eloin secured her gear, enemy fire intensified. Tracer rounds slashing through the night, like red-hot lines drawn across the air. The operators poured from the helicopter in smooth formation, laying suppressive fire with professional precision. The squad scrambled to follow, still stunned, but driven by the instinct to survive. Dust billowed, blurring shapes into shadows. Then the hiss of a launcher cut through everything. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked upward, its exhaust leaving a trail that seared into every soldier's vision. For a split-second time, slowed. Vidor's breath caught. Reeves shouted a warning. Eloin raised the rifle she had just been handed and fired 3 quick rounds. The rocket burst apart in midair, fragments showering the compound like burning hail. The helicopter rocked in the blast wave but remained intact. In that instant, disbelief turned into awe. Move, Eloin's voice carried clear authority. No one hesitated. Operators and squad alike leapfrogged across the courtyard, bounding from wall to wall, firing short bursts to cover each other. The enemy pressed from the edges, shadows illuminated by the strobing muzzle flashes. Ashton stumbled, a round slicing into his shoulder. He cried out, collapsing against a broken wall. Without pause, Eloin grabbed him beneath the arms, dragging him across jagged stone with strength that belied her frame. Dust streaked her face, but her expression never wavered. She pulled him into cover, patched the bleeding briefly, and pushed him toward the waiting operator who guided him toward the helicopter. Another burst of fire pinned Tanner down against the far corner of the courtyard. Bullets chewed into stone inches from his head. He pressed low, trapped. The bearded operator locked eyes with Eloin. No words passed, only a sharp nod. They surged forward together, moving as if they had trained side by side for years. She laid down precise fire, forcing the attackers' heads low, while he sprinted to Tanner, heaving him upright with practiced force. Eloin shifted her fire, covering their retreat step by step. Her stance steady, rhythm unbroken. When the operator staggered under Tanner's weight, she was already there, bracing Tanner's other side. Together they hauled him across the dust-choked yard, each step a defiance of the incoming rounds snapping past. The helicopter's rotors howled, straining against the storm of noise and violence. Flares spat outward, bursting into incandescent blooms that lit the night in chaotic color. The false confidence of the enemy fire faltered under the sudden brilliance. Illusion burned away in fire as countermeasures filled the sky. Eloin pushed Tanner onto the ramp, then turned, covering the final dash as the last ranger vaulted aboard. "Go," the operator shouted, The crew chief slapped the fuselage. The helicopter lurched upward. Engine is roaring. Dust spiraling into blinding clouds. Rounds hammered against its armor, but fell away as altitude climbed. Another RPG streaked in, but the flares caught it, dragging it off course before it burst harmlessly against the night. Inside the aircraft, the air was a furnace of sweat, heat, and blood. Medics worked furiously, bandages unraveling, AV lines jostling. Jensen grimaced as morphine dulled the pain in his thigh. Ashton groaned, but remained conscious. Clutching at the seat, Tanner lay pale, his chest rising shallowly. The squad sat pressed against the walls, eyes darting from the medics to Elowin. Their disbelief lingered in the stunned silence. Broken only by the thrum of rotors and the static of radios, Elowin sat opposite them, headset pressed tight, transmitting rapidly into her tablet. Streams of encrypted data poured upward through the relay. Intelligence harvested in silence now delivered to command. Her calm in the midst of chaos was absolute. Vidor, still catching his breath, stared at her. "What the hell is this?" His voice cracked under strain. A mixture of anger and awe. The bearded operator answered without looking up. "Your mission was cover. Hers was the real one." Vidor fell silent. Around him, the squad's eyes lingered on Elowin. Respect, unspoken, born in fire, began to reshape them. The helicopter rattled as it pushed into the night. Countermeasure pods still releasing bursts of flares that flared bright against the windows before fading into darkness. Inside, red emergency lights cast everything in a muted glow, turning sweat into streaks of crimson and shadows into long, wavering lines. The squad sat pressed along the walls, weapons slack in their hands, chests heaving with the weight of exhaustion. Medics worked swiftly at their feet, hands darting between bandages and IV lines, the low groans of wounded men punctuating the steady thrum of rotors. Across from them, Elowin Thorne sat with her back straight, her tablet glowing faint blue in her lap. Symbols and numbers scrolled rapidly across the screen, her fingers moving with mechanical precision. Her expression had not changed since the moment she had fired the shot that stopped the rocket in midair. Calm, unreadable, every gesture wrapped in quiet authority. Vidor broke the silence first. His voice carried the raw edge of disbelief and anger. "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" His eyes, bloodshot and furious, refused to leave her. The others stared as well, waiting for her to answer. The bearded operator leaned forward before Elowin could speak. His tone was clipped, oficial, devoid of any softness. "You've been running cover for Commander Thorne. Naval Intelligence. Ghost Program." The words hung heavy, their weight pressing into every man present. Reeves blinked, shaking his head as though the name itself were a trick. Ashton, pale from blood loss, whispered. Commander Jensen's hand tightened around his bandage as if anchoring himself to the moment. Vidor's jaw clenched. Ghost Program. What the hell does that even mean? Elowin finally looked up from her tablet. Her gaze swept the squad, steady and unflinching. "It means your mission was never about the compound or the patrols you thought you were tracking. It was about giving me a shadow to work within. The more you believed I was useless, the safer I was to do what had to be done." The red light flickered across her face as she tapped the tablet again. A map unfolded, icons blinking across it, dozens of points along the eastern seaboard. "Symphony," she continued, her tone level, each word landing with surgical precision. "A coordinated strike network. Communications nodes buried inside civilian grids. The men you fought tonight were protecting servers tied to planned attacks on major U.S. cities. New York, Norfolk, San Diego, Los Angeles. 100.0 seconds of simultaneous chaos. That was their design." The squad stared, the scope of her revelation too vast to grasp at once. Reeves muttered, "We were A distraction, Elowen nodded. Every step you took, every bullet fired, was part of keeping eyes away from me long enough to retrieve the core files. Vider's fury cracked. Giving way to something deeper guilt, he shook his head slowly. The weight of realization pressing against his chest. All this time I treated you like baggage. Mocked you. And you, his voice failed. The words drowned in the thrum of engines. Elowen's tone softened slightly. Though her posture remained composed, your doubt protected me. Had you believed otherwise? The enemy might have too. Sometimes invisibility is armor, and you gave me cover without even knowing it. The men looked down at their gear, talismans suddenly smaller beneath the enormity of her truth. The red lights washed over them, revealing their fatigue, their disbelief, and the reluctant respect that now grew in silence. Outside, another flare burst, its brilliance filling the cabin before fading into night. Elowen returned to her screen. Transmitting the last packets of stolen data, she wore no medals. No insignia beyond the unmarked tactical vest hastily strapped to her. Yet in that dim-lit cabin, with wounded men leaning against steel walls and their leader staring at her in stunned silence, her authority was absolute. Ghosts lived unseen, carrying the greatest weight where others refused to look. And in that moment, the squad understood they had been walking beside one all along. Weeks passed before the official report from Forward Operating Base Scorpion found its way into the system. Buried among the numbers and sterile phrases was a single line, analyst Thorny, lost during extraction. No mention of her rifle shot that saved the helicopter. No reference to the beacon she had dismantled. No note of the data she had pulled from under the enemy's nose. Just a quiet erasure. A name folded into the paper silence of bureaucracy. The squad saw it in the carrier logs. Typed neatly without emotion. They exchanged no words about it. Only glances. An empty chair remained in their tent for days afterward. Her absence marked by the space no one dared to fill. Jensen caught himself looking toward it once, as if she might reappear, with her tablet glowing in her lap. Ashton, arms still bound from healing wounds, muttered once that the logs lied, then said no more. Life moved on with the inevitability of orders. Missions came. Missions went. And the squad followed. Yet changes appeared in subtle places. Vidor noticed his men folding their checklists with the same careful creases she had made that first night. Reeves began double-marking anomalies in his reports, a habit that no one had practiced before. Rodis, known for mocking precision, began to keep his rifle notes in neater script. The influence was never spoken aloud, but it was there, woven into the corners of their routine, like threads stitched in shadow. Weeks later, medals arrived. Small boxes handed out in a perfunctory ceremony. Each one was unmarked, a quiet recognition of a mission that supposedly failed. The men accepted them with stiff faces, slipping them into drawers rather than pinning them to uniforms. The gesture meant little, but it carried weight they did not speak of. For them, the real recognition lay in the habits they had adopted, in the ghost of a commander, erased from paper, but carved into memory. Months passed. One evening, as the squad returned from another operation, Vidor found an envelope on his cot. The handwriting was neat, restrained. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Written across it was a number, 72. Beneath it, smaller script added, "Lives saved from Symphony." There was no signature. He burned the note after reading it, not because he wished to forget, but because some truths were too sharp to leave exposed. Still, the number remained etched into his mind, more indelible than any metal. When a new analyst joined the team, a young man fresh from training, the squad surprised him. No mocking words greeted his arrival. Instead, Jensen offered him a chair with a quiet nod. Reeves helped him set up his station, showing where to plug into the comms line. Even Ashton, known for sharp jibes, kept his mouth closed. The analyst, nervous, and stiff, seemed unaware of the shift. But the others knew. They had learned what silence could mean, and respect became instinct, where dismissal once lived, nearly a year later, on a dusty airfield before dawn. Vidor saw her again. She stepped from the shadows of a transport plane, dressed in unmarked tactical gear, hair tied back, eyes as calm as he remembered. For a moment he doubted, thinking it a ghost, conjured by exhaustion, but when she met his gaze, the faintest smile touched her lips. Not pride, not arrogance, simply acknowledgement. Without hesitation, Vidor saluted. The gesture came not from rank or command, but from recognition of truth. She returned it with a small incline of her head before moving on to her work, vanishing once more into the machinery of operations. The squad never spoke of her afterward, yet her presence lingered in the folds of checklists, in the double-marked anomalies, in the way silence became a space of respect rather than ridicule. Legacy did not shout. It whispered, carried in the echoes of action. True recognition was not carved into stone or recorded in logs. It lived quietly in those who had witnessed it, enduring beyond erasure.